Laughter erupted when the wealthy Chinese businesswoman mocked the African-American server until he replied in Mandarin. "Observe that ape waiting on our table," remarked Ms. Chen in Mandarin, pointing at the server as though he were a mere ornament. "I wager he cannot even use chopsticks properly. Individuals such as him ought to be cleaning restrooms, not attending to refined people like us." The table's amusement echoed through the Jade Palace, Manhattan's most exclusive dining establishment. The 5 American executives chuckled nervously, not comprehending a word, yet desperate to impress the lady overseeing a $60 billion enterprise. Marcus Green proceeded to pour wine, his expression unchanged, as if he had not perceived any venomous remark. At 32, he had grown accustomed to enduring such indignities daily for the preceding 8 months. Nevertheless, on this occasion, a distinct quality shone in his gaze, a perilous tranquility found only in those who have survived far greater adversities. Ms. Chen of Horizon Group, among Asia's wealthiest women, had arrived in New York to finalize technology import agreements. Her overbearing manner was renowned, even among fellow billionaires. She regarded Americans as uneducated youngsters and black individuals as a lesser species. "That one likely never even completed high school," she persisted in Mandarin, relishing each harsh utterance. "In America, they believe providing employment to such people constitutes advancement." What a farce! Marcus grasped every utterance, every derogatory term, every scornful observation, every demonstration of cultural dominance. However, what Ms. Chen was unaware of was that this ape conversed fluently in Mandarin, possessed a master's degree in East Asian studies from Harvard, and had dedicated 5 years as a cultural attaché at the U.S. Embassy in Beijing. 8 months prior, Marcus had been Dr. Marcus Green, a principal American authority on U.S.-China affairs. His career disintegrated after he was wrongly accused of transmitting sensitive diplomatic intelligence to China. Despite being fully cleared, opportunities in academia vanished. No institution wished to employ someone investigated by the FBI, regardless of the injustice. "More wine!" Ms. Chen commanded in halting English, deliberately mispronouncing words, as if speaking correctly would diminish her to the level of the locals. Marcus served in silence, observing how she pointedly avoided eye contact. After all, why acknowledge the humanity of a subordinate? While everyone openly ridiculed him, Marcus maintained the unsettling composure of someone holding a secret too potent to be revealed before the opportune moment. Ms. Chen was about to discover that underestimating someone based solely on their skin color could be the gravest error a person makes in their existence. If you are enjoying this tale of retribution and fairness, remember to subscribe to the channel to learn how a simple night of humiliation would transform into the most expensive lesson a billionaire ever paid. Ms. Chen was enjoying herself like a cruel child tormenting a defenseless creature. Over the next 40 minutes, she converted dinner into a spectacle of racial degradation that even made the American executives shift uncomfortably in their seats. "This ape must think he'll receive a generous gratuity tonight," she said in Mandarin, feigning to adjust her napkin as Marcus served the appetizer. "In the United States, they believe giving money resolves the issue of racial inferiority. How naive!" The 5 executives chuckled anxiously, not understanding a word, but sensing that something unkind was transpiring. Thomas Miller, CEO of the largest electronics importer on the East Coast, attempted to change the subject multiple times, but Ms. Chen invariably redirected her attention to Marcus. "You Americans are pathetic," she continued, now alternating between Mandarin and English. "You believe placing these individuals in real jobs is social progress. But just look at him. He cannot even hold a tray without trembling." Marcus was not trembling with fear. His hands were shaking with suppressed fury, recalling how just 9 months earlier he had dined with the Chinese ambassador herself in Washington, discussing multi-billion-dollar trade agreements. At that time, Ms. Chen was likely at some socialite gathering in Shanghai, spending the wealth she inherited from her father. Marcus's decline had been harsh and deliberate. Dr. Marcus Green was regarded as the foremost American expert on Chinese business customs. His doctoral thesis on diplomatic protocols in U.S.-China relations was mandatory reading at universities worldwide. At the age of 30, he was already coordinating governmental negotiations and conversing in Mandarin with native fluency. Everything collapsed when Daniel Owens, a jealous colleague at the State Department, fabricated false documents suggesting that Marcus was transmitting confidential information to Beijing. The FBI investigation lasted 7 months. 7 months of public degradation, sensational headlines, and friends abandoning him. When he was completely absolved, the evidence against him exposed as obvious forgeries, it was too late. No one in the diplomatic sphere wished to employ someone who had been investigated for espionage, even if unjustly. Daniel Owens naturally received the promotion that should have been Marcus's. "Bring the bill," Ms. Chen commanded in halting English, as if speaking correctly would be demeaning. "And tell that little girl, I'm Ms. Chen from Horizon Group. Perhaps he's heard of my family on television." Marcus almost choked. Ms. Chen from Horizon Group, the same Ms. Chen with whom he had exchanged formal emails for 3 years, coordinating visits by trade delegations. The same Ms. Chen who had publicly commended his work at the embassy, calling him the American who truly comprehends their culture. Of course, she did not recognize him. At the time, Marcus wore $3,000 suits and frequented the same social circles as her. Now, in his black server's uniform, he was invisible to someone like Ms. Chen, just another black worker serving her table. "You know what the problem with Americans is," she said in Mandarin, savoring every poisonous word. "You think democracy means everyone is equal, but the reality is that there are superior people and inferior people. It's the natural order of things," she continued, gesturing explicitly at Marcus. "That one, for example, probably has children from 3 different fathers and lives in an apartment with 10 other people. That's how these people live in ignorance and promiscuity." Thomas Miller was visibly uncomfortable. "Ms. Chen, perhaps we should focus on the contracts." No, she interrupted, waving her bejeweled hand. "Let me finish my American sociology lesson. You need to understand who you're dealing with when you do business with us." Marcus continued serving, his face impassive, but internally every word was catalogued and filed away. Ms. Chen did not know she was digging her own grave with every insult, every display of prejudice, every show of cultural arrogance. The worst came when she asked Marcus to approach the table. "You," she said in English, pointing as if she were summoning a dog. "What is your name?" "Marcus, ma'am, Marcus," she repeated, testing the name on her tongue as if it were something unpleasant. "Have you ever heard of China, Marcus? Do you know where it is on the map?" The executives were petrified. The situation had surpassed all limits of acceptable embarrassment, even for men accustomed to the ruthless world of international business. "Yes, ma'am," Marcus replied calmly. Ms. Chen laughed loudly. "How charming! He knows where China is." She turned to the table, speaking in Mandarin. "I would bet my fortune that this ape has never set foot outside New York in his life." It was at that moment that something changed in the restaurant's atmosphere. Marcus ceased noting the order and looked directly into Ms. Chen's eyes for the first time that night. It was not submission. It was not fear. It was something much more dangerous. It was recognition. Each new humiliation only fueled a silent strength growing inside him, a cold determination being forged by the very injustice they were trying to impose on him. What that arrogant billionaire could not see was that every racial slur was writing her own sentence of defeat, word by word, humiliation by humiliation. During the interval between dinner and dessert, while Ms. Chen continued to spew insults in Mandarin to entertain the American executives, Marcus proceeded to the staff restroom with a calmness that contrasted with a storm brewing inside him. That ape probably cannot even count to 100, she said in Mandarin when Marcus was out of sight. I bet the whole family lives on food stamps and government assistance. That's how that inferior race survives in the United States. Thomas Miller was visibly nauseated. Miss Chen, this is going too far. Too far? She laughed. You Americans are so sensitive. In China, we know how to deal with every type of person in his proper place. That's the difference between a civilization that's thousands of years old and a country that's only 200 years old. Meanwhile, in the staff restroom, Marcus took out his mobile device and began typing a message that would change everything. The recipient was Dr. Leewi, his former mentor at Columbia University, currently director of the Center for East Asian Research and one of the most respected Chinese Americans in New York. James, I need an urgent favor. I'm at the Jade Palace in Manhattan, and I just witnessed something that may be of interest to the Chinese diplomatic community. Ms. Chen of Horizon Group is here making extreme racist comments, thinking that no one understands Mandarin. I have everything recorded. Can we meet tomorrow? The reply came in less than 2 minutes. My God, Marcus, where have you been all this time? Yes, let's meet. Ms. Chen is under internal investigation in China for corruption and unethical behavior abroad. Her comments could be exactly what we need. Marcus smiled for the first time in months. Dr. Wei did not know he was working as a server. In the message, Marcus had identified himself only as a witness to the events. His mentor still knew him as the brilliant diplomat he had been. When Marcus returned to the hall, Ms. Chen had intensified her campaign of denigration to a level that made even the most callous executives shift uncomfortably. She was speaking in deliberately broken English, imitating accents she considered inferior. You know how to clear a table properly, she said to Marcus in childish English, as if she were talking to a child. Or do you only know how to carry plates like a trained monkey? The executives fell into a deathly silence. Even for men accustomed to the cruelty of international business, this was unacceptable. But none of them had the courage to confront a woman who controlled billion-dollar contracts. I can clear the table perfectly, ma'am, Marcus replied, with a calmness that contrasted with the violence of her words. How charming, she laughed loudly. He can speak properly. Maybe he's not as dumb as he looks. She turned to the executives. Did you see that? When you treat these people firmly, they learn how to behave. That was when Ms. Chen made the mistake that would seal her fate. She took out her mobile device and began recording a video, narrating in Mandarin. I am here at Manhattan's most costly restaurant, demonstrating how Americans instruct their black laborers. Look how quiet he is when I speak with authority. Marcus persisted in clearing the table, but internally every second of that video was being cataloged as evidence. Ms. Chen was documenting her own downfall, creating video evidence of her racial and cultural arrogance. In China, she continued recording, we know that each race has its natural function. Black Americans are good for manual labor, but never for leadership or intelligence. It's basic biology. Thomas Miller stood up abruptly. Excuse me, I need to make a call. He left the table clearly upset, followed by 2 other executives. The situation had crossed all boundaries of tolerance. Ms. Chen interpreted their departure as tacit approval. Did you see how it works? When you establish a clear hierarchy, even Americans understand. She continued recording. Here is a perfect example of how to maintain social order. He knows exactly where his place is in the world. Marcus finished clearing the table and stood respectfully to the side, waiting for instructions. But his eyes no longer showed submission. There was something different there, a growing intensity that Ms. Chen was too busy with her performance to notice. Over the next 20 minutes, she created a complete file of evidence against herself. Comments about Chinese racial superiority, insults directed specifically at black Americans, theories about a natural hierarchy between races, and clear demonstrations of discrimination based on skin color. You know what the problem with America is? she said in Mandarin, still recording. You give too many rights to people who should just serve. That server over there, for example, probably thinks he deserves the same salary as educated people like us. That's when Marcus made a decision that would change not only his life, but potentially the business relations between two world powers. He subtly retrieved his own mobile device and began recording her recording, a video within a video, capturing not only the words, but the expression of cruel pleasure on her face as she humiliated another human being. People like you, Ms. Chen proceeded in Mandarin, pointing directly at Marcus, should be grateful for having any job at all. When I was a student in China, we had a saying, a dog that barks doesn't bite, but a dog that doesn't bark doesn't think either. Marcus kept his expression neutral, but internally he was compiling not just evidence, but strategies. Every insult would be documented. Every display of prejudice would be catalogued. Every moment of arrogance would be preserved for the reckoning that would come. What Ms. Chen could not see was that with every poisonous word, she was not only digging her own professional grave, but potentially creating an international diplomatic incident. Marcus knew exactly which Chinese and American organizations would be interested in that material. Tomorrow I intend to upload this to my social networks, she said in Mandarin, ending the recording. My followers in China will find it hilarious to see how Americans allow this kind of people to work in decent places. Marcus smirked faintly. Ms. Chen was right about one thing. Someone would definitely find those videos very interesting, but it would not be her followers on social media. As she put her phone away, satisfied with her cruel performance, Marcus continued serving with the patience of a man who knows that true justice sometimes needs to be prepared slowly, like a fine dish being carefully seasoned before being served. What that arrogant billionaire could not imagine was that every second of humiliation she had inflicted was being turned into ammunition for a battle she did not even know had begun. And when the conflict finally erupted, she would discover that she had chosen the wrong opponent at the wrong time, using the wrong weapons against someone who played at a completely different level than her. Ms. Chen was concluding her third glass of expensive champagne when she decided to take her cruel performance to the grand finale. The few American executives remaining at the table were visibly uncomfortable, but she interpreted this as admiration for her cultural superiority. You know what? She said in Mandarin, looking directly at Marcus. I'm going to teach this ape a lesson about social hierarchy. She turned to Marcus and said in broken English, You know how to dance like a monkey? I want to see a funny show. It was at that moment that Marcus Green made the decision that would change everything. He stopped clearing the table, straightened his shoulders, and for the first time that evening, smiled. A smile that made Thomas Miller choke on his wine. Ms. Chen, Marcus stated in flawless Mandarin, his pronunciation more elegant than hers. I believe you are confusing this establishment with a zoo. The silence that fell over the restaurant was deafening. Ms. Chen was completely paralyzed, her face turning every shade of white imaginable. The words in fluent Mandarin coming out of Marcus's mouth were like lightning striking her in the chest. What? What did you say? She stammered in English, her arrogance evaporating like water in the desert. Marcus proceeded in classical Mandarin, his fluency demonstrating years of academic study. I said, it's interesting how some people confuse money with education, birth with character, and social status with human value. The American executives were speechless. Thomas Miller, who had collaborated with Chinese translators for years, immediately recognized that Marcus not only spoke Mandarin, he had mastered dialects and nuances that only someone with a higher education could achieve. You speak Chinese, Ms. Chen murmured, her voice almost inaudible. Classical Mandarin, modern Mandarin, Cantonese, and 3 regional dialects. Marcus replied calmly, now switching between English and Mandarin in addition to English, French, and a little Japanese. But I imagine you've already noticed that from the last 90 minutes of conversation. The realization hit Ms. Chen like a punch in the stomach. 90 minutes. He had understood every word, every racial slur, every display of prejudice, every cruel comment she had hurled at him in Mandarin. "That's impossible," she stammered, trying to regain control. "You're just a black American server." "I am a server," Marcus affirmed, his voice firm but unaggressive. "But I am also Dr. Marcus Green with a PhD in East Asian Studies from Harvard University, specializing in U.S.-China relations and Chinese business culture." He paused, letting the information sink in. "I worked for 5 years as a cultural attaché at the American Embassy in Beijing. I coordinated trade delegations between our countries and published 17 academic articles on Chinese diplomatic protocol." Thomas Miller almost overturned his chair as he stood up. "Good heavens, you are Marcus Green. I read your thesis on Chinese investment in American infrastructure. You disappeared from the diplomatic world a year ago." Ms. Chen felt the world spinning around her. "But why are you working as a server?" "Because sometimes life teaches us lessons in humility," Marcus replied. "I was falsely accused of espionage by the FBI. By the time I was completely cleared, the doors to the diplomatic world had already closed." He looked her straight in the eye. "So, I took this job to survive. And for 8 months, people like you humiliated me daily, making comments in Mandarin, thinking I didn't understand." Marcus extracted his mobile phone from his pocket. "Comments about my race, my intelligence, theories about the natural hierarchy between peoples, and entire philosophies about superiority based on national origin and skin color." Ms. Chen realized where this was going, and her face turned green. You wouldn't dare. You recorded everything." Marcus smiled. "Of course I did. Every insult, every display of prejudice, every moment of racial arrogance, including the video you made of yourself explaining your theories about Chinese superiority and black inferiority." Ms. Chen's humiliation was complete, but Marcus was not finished. "In fact, Ms. Chen, I believe we have a professional acquaintance. I coordinated 3 conferences on U.S. or China investment in which her company participated." He paused dramatically. "She was present at 2 video conferences with me in 2022. Of course, I was wearing a suit and speaking as an equal with ambassadors. It's understandable that you didn't recognize me serving at his table." Ms. Chen tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come out. Not only had she been completely exposed, but she discovered that the man who had spent the evening humiliating her was someone who had negotiated diplomatic agreements that affected her own company. Marcus continued, now with the natural authority of someone accustomed to commanding meeting rooms. "You said that people like me don't understand international politics. But I spent 3 years negotiating trade agreements between the United States and China, including some contracts that directly benefited Horizon Group." The American executives were in a state of total shock. They finally understood that they had spent the entire evening passively watching one of the foremost American authorities on Chinese culture being racially humiliated by an ignorant billionaire. "You have also developed several theories about intellectual capacity based on race," Marcus said, still in a calm but devastating tone. "It would be interesting to know what her Chinese governing party would think about a Chinese businesswoman promoting theories of racial superiority on American soil." Ms. Chen finally found her voice. "You can't. It would ruin her reputation. His international contracts. Her position in the family business." Marcus finished gently. "I imagine so, especially considering that China has very strict policies about citizens who embarrass the country abroad." Thomas Miller, still processing the revelation, muttered, "Ms. Chen, you humiliated one of America's leading experts on your own culture." Marcus took out his mobile device and showed the screen to Ms. Chen. "I've already sent a copy of the recordings to Dr. Leewi, director of Columbia's Center for East Asian Research. He was, let's just say, very interested in the content. The display showed a message from Dr. Wei. Marcus, this is explosive. The Chinese consulate needs to see this immediately." Ms. Chen may have created an international diplomatic incident. I also sent it to the Chinese Business Association in the United States, Marcus continued calmly. They have a very strict code of ethics regarding member behavior on foreign soil. Ms. Chen was perspiring. Her company depended on international contracts, and any racial scandal could cost billions in canceled deals. Worse still, the Chinese government did not tolerate citizens who created diplomatic problems. "Please," she whispered. All her arrogance evaporated. I didn't know who he was, and that would justify his treatment if he were really just a server," Marcus asked, his question echoing through the silent restaurant. "Does human dignity depend on a diploma or a bank account?" The restaurant manager, who had been watching from a distance, approached the table. "Mr. Green," he uttered with newfound deference. "I didn't know his background. From now on, our policy will be very different." Marcus nodded. "Thank you, but this isn't about me. It's about how we treat people we consider different when we think we can act without consequences." Ms. Chen attempted one final time. "Dr. Green, maybe we can come to an agreement." "An agreement?" Marcus smiled sadly. "Ms. Chen, for 8 months, dozens of people like you humiliated him, thinking he was just another ignorant worker. Every insult was cataloged, every display of prejudice documented. He put his phone away. The only thing I want now is for her to leave here knowing that she has been intellectually destroyed by a black American man he considered trash. And may that lesson stay with her for the rest of her life." Ms. Chen rose from the table with trembling legs, her arrogance replaced by pure panic. She knew that when those videos reached the right circles in China and the United States, her career would be over. Marcus remained calm and dignified until the end, proving that true strength does not come from money or status, but from character. As Ms. Chen left the restaurant carrying the weight of the greatest humiliation of her life, one question hung in the air. Was it possible for someone so consumed by prejudice to learn anything? Or do some people simply need to learn the hard way that arrogance always comes at a price? 3 months after that night at Jade Palace, both of their lives had changed completely, but in opposite ways. Ms. Chen awoke once more to ruinous headlines. "Billionaire Chen loses $800 million in contracts after racist videos," read the Wall Street Journal. The Chinese consulate had issued an official statement distancing itself from her remarks, and Horizon Group forfeited 70% of its U.S. agreements in just 2 weeks. "The family has decided that you need some time to reflect," his uncle said in Mandarin during a tense video conference. "His executive privileges are suspended indefinitely." The woman who had arrived in New York as a queen was returning home as a corporate pariah. Meanwhile, Marcus Green had become an international phenomenon. The video of the confrontation went viral with over 50 million views, turning him into a global symbol of dignity in the face of prejudice. Universities in 3 countries invited him to speak, and the State Department offered his old position back with a promotion and a 60% raise. It wasn't about revenge, Marcus clarified in a CNN interview. It was about showing that human dignity is priceless and that education can be found where we least expect it. He agreed to return to diplomacy, but kept 1 day a week at Jade Palace, now as a senior consultant and junior partner. The restaurant became a pilgrimage site for human rights activists. Customers from around the world came to see the place where a server had taught a billionaire a lesson in humility. The movement led to the creation of the Marcus Green Protocol, zero-tolerance policies against discrimination in commercial establishments. Ms. Chen made a concluding public plea, recording a video apology that only made her situation worse. "I apologize for my unfortunate comments," she said in halting English. But social media was merciless. "Not unfortunate, racist. He's only apologizing because he got caught. Privilege doesn't buy character." 6 months later, during a conference on corporate diversity, Marcus ran into Thomas Miller, one of the executives who had witnessed everything. "Marcus, you taught us that underestimating people is the biggest business mistake there is," Miller said, shaking his hand with genuine respect. Chen, meanwhile, resided in isolation in Shanghai, her arrogance replaced by social isolation. Friends avoided her, contracts were canceled, and her reputation never recovered. The most expensive lesson a billionaire has ever paid. Money can't buy dignity, and prejudice always takes its toll. If this story about dignity overcoming adversity and justice touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and leave a comment. How would you react if you witnessed a situation like this? Together, we can spread the message that respect is not a privilege. It is a basic right of every human being.